Welcome back to Tokyo PM. Thank you for joining us today. And I wanted to take the opportunity to kind of ramble a little bit on why do I love Tokyo? Why do I think Tokyo is one of the most vibrant and incredible cities in the world to be in, especially now post pandemic? And what potential, can you find for yourself here in the city? Tokyo is incredibly stable. So this is a city that during the pandemic, we never really locked down. We did have state of emergencies, but in terms of legal framework, we don't have the means for the government to actually impose a lockdown or impose any fines. And so everything was done primarily voluntarily. You do have regional governments that are able to institute fines on restaurants or on other facilities, but there is no legal precedent to be able to restrict the movements of individuals, even in the case of a pandemic. And so we never had lockdowns similar to what occurred in US or in Europe and or in China. And in the meantime, we've kept our numbers relatively low over the pandemic. Now, post pandemic, Japan's pretty much the same. Now we're finally starting to take off our masks because it's getting really hot. But seeing Tokyo sort of weather the storm in a way that shows, yes, some restaurants had to close, some small businesses had to close, but the city itself is always rebuilding and always adapting. It's a very stable and safe city to be in. Now, my second point is it's remarkably dynamic. Going a little bit into the history of Tokyo, it used to be this fishing village when it first started, when the Tokugawa shogunate decided to set up here and set up their government here. It used to be this tiny little fishing village. There wasn't much here. And it's since become a huge city. There was a time where Tokyo was the biggest city in the world, bigger than London, bigger than New York, which is admittedly a rather new city, but bigger than, any Rome in terms of city population, because it was huge. And from that point, Tokyo has continued to redefine itself and develop as to this global city that it is today. In the 1930s, I think around 1932, Tokyo actually had a really big earthquake, the Great Kanto earthquake. And similar to London, huge fires, a lot of people died. Wasn't a very good time. But Tokyo was rebuilt as this beautiful Art Deco kind of city where everyone's vibrant, it's really lively, and it was an incredible time to be in the city. Now, unfortunately, a lot of that was decimated after World War II. So during World War II, of course, you had the firebombing of the city. I think 100,000 people were killed. And so the city was flat. Like if you look at pictures, if you go to the History Museum here, the city was flat. And what's incredible is to see a city bounce back from that in such an incredible way. You look at Tokyo, you look at Japan in the 1960s, where we were, if I'm not mistaken, we were rather poor as an economy, and just looking at us completely expand to the point where those in the US were saying, wait, Japan's going to overtake the US in terms of GDP size, which is insane. And then, of course, in the 1990s, seeing us sort of teeter out a little bit. And from there, it's been a little bit iffy. But what's been incredible to see in this city is even during the pandemic, you have a lot of restaurants closing, you have a lot of small businesses closing, but there's such a drive to innovate and there's such a drive to keep growing that, there's new restaurants popping up everywhere. There's so much entrepreneurial initiative in the city that can very easily go unnoticed unless you're looking in the right places. Now, another nice thing about Tokyo is it's a gateway to Asia in the sense that Japan has a very outsized impact for a country on the international stage. For example, I think we're the second largest donor to the UN, which does not equate to political sort of sway, but Japan is very excited to engage in these international forums in an outsized way to say, hey, look, we want to be seen, we want to be on the global stage. And the same is true for business. You look at Japan has a lot of influence in ASEAN with a lot of money going into these countries and saying, hey, let's develop your infrastructure. Let's build up your businesses. And in return, we're also getting a benefit of having more customers, for example. And so Tokyo provides this bedrock where you have a very solid economic framework to then be able to expand in Asia. And I see the likes of Warren Buffett or the likes I see the likes of Warren Buffett or they see the likes of other rich people coming into Japan, these hedge fund managers, they're currently looking at Japan and they're saying this is an exciting place to be. And especially now, because when you look at 2008, Japan lost a lot of foreign investment. A lot of it went back to the US, and Japan wasn't a very nice place to be. But at the moment, the yen is cheap. We didn't have the same inflation rate hikes that we did in other countries, which is, sorry, we didn't have the same interest rate hikes that you found in other countries. And because of that, the Japanese yen actually went down to 150 yen to the dollar, which was very steep, very fast. But you look at Japan now, and our borrowing rates of interest is still less than 2%, I believe, because our government is in debt to the point where they can't really raise the interest rates. Now, I'm not an economist, so don't quote me on these things, but it's exciting because that means that there's a lot of potential for growth and there's a lot of potential for taking loans and using that to expand yourself, or maybe in other countries that might be limiting. But I have to say, all in all, Tokyo is a beautiful city. It's so vibrant. It's so dynamic. There's so many different areas of Tokyo. Like you've got Shibuya, which feels like this big cultural center. You've got Shinjuku, which I'll be honest is a mess, like train stations, and it's just busy. But it's also a very big economic hub for the city. But you also have smaller areas like Shitakimozawa or Sangenjaya and these are all little places where you have the opportunity to explore. And Tokyo doesn't have this. Yes, it does have main hubs like Shibuya or Shinjuku or Otemachi, for example. But each region of Tokyo has its own vibe, has its own atmosphere. And so such a well interconnected city that you don't feel like 33 million people live here. When I say 33 million people, I don't mean just the people that are in like Tokyo proper, but also in the surrounding area. It's a lot of people in not a lot of space. And it's incredible to see how this city works and this grows. And so I think that there's a lot of potential for those who are looking to do anything here in Tokyo. It's really an incredible megapolis and I love it. I see myself being here for the rest of my professional life, at least. Maybe not retirement, but I find Tokyo such a vibrant city, and the food, I have to say, food is also incredible. So, if you ever see yourself in Tokyo, or if you have any questions about Tokyo or travel recommendations, I'm happy to point you in exciting directions. But yeah, this is a little bit of a love letter to Tokyo City. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next one.